Hey, thanks for joining me on my podcast. My name is Joey. I'm the lead pastor of the Block Church, and my podcast is all about leadership in tough places. And we planted the Block Church in Philadelphia, and my hope is that some of the things we've learned from leading in a tough place like a major city in the United States can enhance your leadership, especially if you're leading in a tough environment. And today is part two of our topic, Urbanomics, winning in the city. Just to review, last one, if you haven't watched it, stop, go back and watch the last one, which was part one. We talked about consuming the culture, defining the mission, and always telling the story of your brand. I want to take the next three that, again, how we experienced it, how we grew, how we experienced success, how we've won in the city. This is what it's meant to me. Hopefully you can apply this to you. But here's the next three. Number one of part two, you got to build family and community through proximity. What I mean by that is if you're going to come into the city and do a work, if you're going to be a leader in a tough place as a missionary, you actually have to have a missionary mentality. If you're going to go to a difficult environment, there's going to be a lot that's against you. You may have family that doesn't understand why you're doing what you're doing. You may have people who think it's crazy. You may have people who don't want to invest in those places because they have different ideas and ideologies about those sorts of places. Whatever it is, you've got to have a missionary mentality. And for us, what we did is we built family and community through proximity. Early on in our church, we had an opportunity. That original home, I talked about it in the last episode, but that original home that we were in, that we rented, where we put our 9 months up front, well, God restored a lot of that, and we had an opportunity to buy our first home. And it was in the neighborhood in which we first planted. And it's a miracle story. The funds came in miraculously, and I went and I laid hands on the house, and I did Jericho marches and all those good things. But what it did is it basically, when we bought a home in that neighborhood of the city, it put our feet in the soil, and then it encouraged other people to do the same. We had multiple couples, tons of families who then went and bought in that neighborhood. It was fun. There were moments where we literally were like, wow, we beat the system on life. Like, how is it that our friends, our closest companions, our teammates are around the corner, just a block away? And that's what we were trying to foster and build, which became contagious. But we felt like to win in the city, we needed to build family and community through proximity. We wanted it to be contagious. We wanted to feel like we were at home. And with friends who became family nearby, we absolutely were. And I know there's a lot of arguments, particularly in cities, about what happens when people move into neighborhoods. But to be honest with you, I think some of the best things happened in that neighborhood as a result of all of us moving into it. Coffee shops started, restaurants started coming in. I'm not attributing all that to us, but I do attribute it to the move of God that took place in that neighborhood, and things up from the ground. The peace of the city and the success of the city was in cohesion, and it was part of our contribution. So you got to build family and community through proximity. The next one is you got to develop grit and a high pain tolerance. Develop grit and a high pain tolerance. I could speak for days on this, but ultimately, if you're going to be in a tough place, you've got to be constantly working on your grit and your pain tolerance. During the pandemic season, I was so impressed by the people on our staff and on our team who lived in neighborhoods like ours that were getting ransacked and destroyed as bombs and guns and helicopters going off above our houses night after night. That was the high point. That was the climax of some of the pain we've experienced for some, but it was all the other experiences leading up to it that developed grit, and we had family and community. We had already developed a high pain tolerance by making our lives uncomfortable to be missionaries in these difficult places, that I think it allowed us to stay put and fight through some of the most bizarre and challenging moments in our personal and church's history. Last one is this for this part 2 is if you want to win in the city, particularly in the church context, you've got to run lean and master margin. Run lean and master margin. I have a teaching on my page about being the master of margin. You should watch it. But what I mean by running lean is particularly in an urban context with urban churches, you're dealing with, in the city of Philadelphia, most deep poverty in the country. Some households, that's what that means, $12,000 to $15,000 a year of total household income. And so we've had to learn to run lean and master margin. We've combated that by putting the highest of value on volunteerism. You'll see some pictures right now of our team conference and even volunteers serving. And we put from the very beginning the utmost service, love, and emphasis on volunteers, making them the heroes, because the reality is things that you might be able to pay for in other contexts, we can't pay for in ours. So these people become our heroes, and we try to treat them as such. So to review, you want to win the city. Part 2, build family and community through proximity, have a missionary mentality, develop grit and a high pain tolerance, and then run lean and master margin. Hey, if this is helpful, please subscribe, like, all the above. This is Leadership in Tough Places. Come back for part 3 soon.